April 30th, 1943, 4:30 in the morning. The Atlantic is black, cold, silent. A British submarine sits barely submerged off the coast of Huelva, Spain. Her crew has been told almost nothing. Need to know. Only. Below deck, 2 officers slide open a sealed steel canister, refrigerated, locked since Scotland. Inside is a dead man. He wears the uniform of a Royal Marines major. A leather briefcase is chained to his wrist. His pockets hold love letters, theater stubs, a photograph of a woman who never knew his name. He has an identity card, a rank, a fiancée, a bank overdraft. None of it is real. In 30 minutes, this body enters the water. The tide does the rest. If this works, if the most audacious lie in modern warfare holds, tens of thousands of Allied soldiers live. If it doesn't, they die on the beaches of Sicily before the fight even begins. You are watching Liberty Frontline WWII. If you want to hear the full story of how a dead man, a forged briefcase, and 2 intelligence officers changed the entire Mediterranean war, hit that like button and subscribe. Every file we open is the version buried in after-action reports and declassified intelligence records. Let's go. January 1943. North Africa is almost won. The Allied armies have driven Rommel's forces to the edge of Tunisia. The Desert War has weeks left. But the generals are already thinking past it. Churchill, Eisenhower, the combined chiefs of staff, all staring at the same map, all asking the same question. Where do we go next? The answer is obvious. Dangerously obvious. Sicily. The island sits at the center of the Mediterranean like a cork in a bottle. Take it, and you open the sea lanes. Take it, and you have a platform to invade mainland Italy. Take it, and you crack open what Churchill called the soft underbelly of Europe. At the Casablanca Conference in January 1943, the decision is formalized. Codenamed Operation Husky. Target date, no later than July 1943. But Churchill himself said it plainly in a planning session. Everyone but a bloody fool would know that it's Sicily. He was right. Every German intelligence analyst with a map could see it coming. The Allied buildup in North Africa, the naval positioning, the logistics trails, all of it pointed directly at that island. Without strategic surprise, the casualty projections were devastating. A fortified Sicilian coastline could stop the entire invasion cold. They needed the Germans looking somewhere else. Inside MI5's London headquarters, RAF Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley is reading a 4-year-old memo written in September 1939 under the name of Rear Admiral John Godfrey, Director of Naval Intelligence. But the language, sharp, lateral, almost playful, carries the fingerprints of Godfrey's personal assistant, Lieutenant Commander Ian Fleming. The document is called the Trout Memo, named for fly fishing. The concept, just as a fisherman deceives a trout with an artificial fly, British intelligence should deceive the enemy with artificial information. It lists dozens of schemes. Item number 28 reads almost casually. A corpse dressed as an airman, with dispatches in his pockets, could be dropped on the coast, supposedly from a failed parachute. Cholmondeley sets the memo down. He knows what Operation Husky needs, and he believes Item 28 has been sitting unused for too long. He begins to write. His plan, codenamed Trojan Horse, is this. Obtain a recently deceased body. Dress it as a British officer. Load it with falsified documents pointing to an Allied invasion somewhere other than Sicily. Place it in the water near Spanish coastline, known to feed intelligence directly to the German Abwehr. Let the tide do the rest. In November 1942, the 20 Committee rejects it. Too many variables. Too many failure points. One careful Spanish pathologist and the entire operation collapses. But Committee Chairman John Masterman sees potential. He assigns a second officer to rebuild the plan with Cholmondeley, a naval representative, a peacetime barrister. Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague. Montague runs NID-17M, the Naval Intelligence Counter-Espionage Sub-Branch. He is precise, methodical, detail-obsessed. He reads Cholmondeley's draft and immediately sees both the gaps and the potential. Together, they rebuild it entirely. On February 4th, 1943, they submit the revised plan. The 20 Committee approves it. It moves up the chain to Churchill, then to Eisenhower. Both sign off. The operation has a new name now, Operation Mincemeat. And the first problem, the most fundamental problem, has no clean solution. They need a body. Montague consults Sir Bernard Spilsbury, Britain's foremost forensic pathologist. The question is precise. What kind of corpse can pass examination by a Spanish military doctor after days in the Atlantic? Spilsbury's answer changes everything. Air crash victims frequently die from shock, not drowning. Lungs are not always filled with water. A body that died on land could pass for a drowning victim if the examining doctor was not looking for inconsistencies. And Spilsbury adds one more detail. Spanish pathologists, as Roman Catholics, are generally averse to full post-mortems unless cause of death carries legal weight. A body recovered at sea, uniformed, carrying identification. There would likely be no reason to look deeply. The window is open. On January 24th, 1943, a homeless Welsh man named Glyndwr Michael is found dead in an abandoned King's Cross warehouse. Rat poison, phosphorus compound. No family, no one waiting, no one to ask questions. Coroner Bentley Purchase contacts Montague immediately. Montague examines the body, undernourished, yellowed from the poison. It doesn't look like a combat officer. Purchase says simply, he doesn't have to look like a field officer, only a staff officer. The body is transferred. Refrigerated to exactly 4 degrees Celsius. Purchase is direct about the deadline. 3 months. After that, decomposition makes it unusable. The clock starts January 28, 1943. Montague and Cholmondeley now have a corpse, a code name, and full Allied command approval. They have less than 90 days to turn a dead homeless man into the most convincing British officer in the history of military deception. What happens next has never been attempted at this scale, and the Germans have no idea it's coming. The body has a name now. Captain Acting Major William Martin, Royal Marines, assigned to Combined Operations Headquarters. The name was chosen deliberately. Several real men named Martin existed at roughly that rank. If the Germans cross-checked, the name would produce noise, not a clean answer. The rank was calculated, too. Senior enough to carry sensitive documents. Junior enough that no one would expect to personally recognize him. But a name is not enough. A man is his habits, his debts, his anxieties, his Saturday nights. To survive German scrutiny, William Martin had to feel real in every pocket, every crease, every folded letter. Montague called it pocket litter. He built it like a novelist. A photograph of a fiancée named Pam. Actually, John Leslie, an MI5 clerk who agreed to be photographed without knowing exactly why. 2 love letters from her, tender and specific. A receipt from a Bond Street jeweler for a diamond engagement ring costing £53, 10 shillings and 6pence. A stern letter from Martin's father. A demand from Lloyd's Bank for repayment of an overdraft of £79, 19 shillings and 2pence. Theater ticket stubs. A bill for 4 nights at the Naval and Military Club. Stamps. A silver cross. A St. Christopher's medallion. Cigarettes. Matches. A pencil stub. Every item placed Martin in London between April 18th and 24th. A full itinerary of a living man reconstructed from 2 coat pockets. The identity card required its own solution. Photographs of the corpse looked exactly like photographs of a corpse. Montague found Captain Ronnie Reed of MY5, who bore a passable resemblance. Reed was photographed in Royal Marines uniform. His face became Martin's face. Montague then spent weeks rubbing the identity cards against his trouser legs. Enough friction to dull them, to make them look carried and lived in. Cholmondeley wore Martin's battle dress for weeks so the fabric would crease in the right places. Every detail had to be earned. The pocket litter was cover. The engine of the operation was the briefcase. The central document, what Montague privately called the vital document, was a personal letter from Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye, Vice Chief of the Imperial General Staff, to General Sir Harold Alexander, commander of the 18th Army Group in North Africa. Nye wrote it himself. Staff officer drafts had sounded like men trying to sound natural. Nye was given the key points and trusted with the real objective. The result was, by Montague's own assessment, quite brilliant. The letter described reinforcements for an assault on beaches south of Cape Araxos in Greece and at Kalamata on the Peloponnese. It named the 5th Division and the 56th Division as assault forces. Sicily was referenced explicitly, but as a cover target, a feint, a deception to mislead the Germans away from the real landings. The letter inverted the truth completely. Sicily was the lie. Greece was the plan. A second letter accompanied it, written under the name of Vice Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten, introducing Martin as an amphibious warfare expert to Admiral Sir Andrew Cunningham, Commander-in-Chief of the Mediterranean Fleet. It referenced Dieppe, frankly, as a failure, uncomfortable enough to feel genuine. It included a deliberate clumsy joke about sardines, inserted by Montague, hoping German analysts would read it as a reference to Sardinia. A single black eyelash was placed inside the folded Mountbatten letter. If the envelope was opened, the eyelash would fall. It would not be replaced correctly. That was the tell. MI5 scientists tested different inks in seawater. Only the most durable brands were used. The documents were locked in the briefcase. The briefcase was chained to Martin's wrist. April 17th, 1943. Montague and Cholmondeley dress the body for the last time. The canister is sealed and loaded into a van. Behind the wheel is St. John Horsfall, a pre-war racing driver chosen for his nerve and his speed. They drive through the night to Greenock, Scotland. The canister is transferred to HMS Seraph, a British S-class submarine under Lieutenant Norman Jewell. The crew is told the canister contains a secret meteorological device. Nothing more. April 19th, HMS Seraph departs Holy Loch. She runs submerged through the Bay of Biscay, past Gibraltar, into the western Mediterranean. 10 days at sea. In London, Montague and Cholmondeley wait. There is nothing left to do. The operation belongs to the tide now. April 29th. HMS Seraph surfaces in darkness off Huelva, Spain. Jewell orders all enlisted crew below. Only officers remain topside. The canister is opened. The body is placed into the water 1 mile off the Spanish coast. Life jacket on. Briefcase chained to the wrist. Time, 4:30 hours. HMS Seraph submerges and disappears. Huelva was not chosen by accident. The coastal currents ran reliably toward shore. The local Spanish military was strongly pro-German. An active Abwehr officer named Adolf Klaus operated there undercover. The local pathologist was considered unsophisticated. The British consul, Francis Heselden, was considered reliable. Every variable mapped, every contingency considered. At 9:30 hours on the morning of April 30th, a sardine fisherman named Jose Antonio Rey Maria was out on the water in a small skiff called the Anna. He saw something floating face down in the Atlantic. He had no intention of making history that morning. He was just looking for sardines. At 9:30 hours on April 30th, 1943, fisherman Jose Antonio Rey Maria hauled the body of Major William Martin from the Atlantic and brought him ashore at Huelva. The Spanish authorities took custody immediately. The briefcase was noted. The uniform was noted. The identity card was examined. A military pathologist named Eduardo del Torno performed the post-mortem examination the following morning. British consul Francis Heselden was present. Quietly, carefully, Heselden urged del Torno to move quickly. The heat, the smell, the condition of the body. Del Torno found inconsistencies. The state of decomposition was advanced, more advanced than the timeline should have allowed, but he concluded, drowning. No reason to look further. The briefcase was retained by the Spanish Navy. Major William Martin was buried with full military honors on May 4th, 1943, in the cemetery of Nuestra Señora de la Soledad, Huelva. A wreath was laid. The grave was marked. The British consul immediately began sending urgent, agitated messages back to London demanding the return of the documents. The messages were deliberately transmitted in a code the British knew the Germans had already broken. The agitation was the performance. Every panicked cable was a signal to German intelligence that the British believed the case had been returned untouched, and that what was inside it mattered enormously. It was the final layer of the deception. But would Germany take the bait? The documents had been photographed and copied by Abwehr chief Wilhelm Leisner in Madrid before being carefully resealed and returned to the British on May 13th. The copies were radioed to Berlin immediately. Paper copies followed days later. In Berlin, the letters landed in front of Colonel Alexis von Roene, one of the Abwehr's most senior intelligence analysts. Von Roene read the Nye letter carefully. He read the Mountbatten letter. He reviewed the pocket litter. His conclusion, filed on May 11th, was unequivocal. The documents were genuine. The Allied invasion targets were Greece and Sardinia. Sicily was a feint. 4 days later, Captain Ulrich of the German General Staff produced a follow-up assessment for Admiral Karl Dönitz. His language was even more emphatic. No further doubts remain regarding the reliability of the captured documents, Ulrich wrote. Examination as to whether they were intentionally put into our hands shows that this is most unlikely. One man in Hitler's inner circle was not convinced. Joseph Goebbels, reading the letters carefully, noted privately in his diary that something about them felt too clean, too convenient. "I don't know whether the letter is merely camouflage," he wrote on May 25th. But Goebbels kept his doubts to himself, and no one else was asking questions. Hitler received the intelligence on May 14th in a meeting with Admiral Dönitz. He had always feared an Allied thrust through the Balkans. The region was Germany's industrial lifeline. Romanian oil, Balkan chrome, bauxite, copper. Lose the Balkans, and the German war machine begins to starve. The Nye letter didn't change what Hitler believed. It confirmed it. Dönitz recorded the Führer's position in his war diary that same day. The Führer does not agree with the Duce that the most likely invasion point is Sicily. Furthermore, he believes that the discovered Anglo-Saxon order confirms the assumption that the planned attacks will be directed mainly against Sardinia and the Peloponnesus. Days later, Hitler wrote directly to Mussolini. It is clear from documents which have been found that they intend to invade the Peloponnese. Within the next few days or weeks, a large number of German divisions must be sent immediately to the Peloponnese. Then General Jodl was overheard on a telephone call to German commanders in Rome. 5 words. "You can forget Sicily. We know it's Greece." The orders went out. The 1st German Panzer Division, fully re-equipped after service on the Eastern Front, 18,000 men, 83 tanks, was transferred from Brittany, France, all the way to the Salonika region of northern Greece, rolled from one end of occupied Europe to the other, to counter an invasion that existed only in a dead man's briefcase. 7 infantry divisions were redeployed from Italy to the Balkans. Additional German forces reinforced Sardinia. Luftwaffe assets were repositioned. Naval elements shifted. Sicily received nothing. The deception was spreading faster than Montagu had dared to hope. German intelligence stations in Rhodes, Athens, Ankara, and Stockholm were all independently picking up fragments of the same false information, passed between sources, amplified, confirmed by gossip, confirmed again by diplomatic rumor. It had taken on a life of its own, an echo growing louder with every repetition. Bletchley Park was reading it all. The ultra-decrypts were flowing back to London in real time. Each intercept confirmed the same thing. Germany believed it completely. On May 19th, Hitler held a military conference. He had barely slept. He told his generals that he had been awake in recent nights thinking through the consequences of losing the Balkans. He ordered 1 armored division transferred to the Peloponnese as a precautionary measure. He was planning his defense of a coastline the Allies had never intended to touch. In London, Montagu filed his interim report on June 8th. He reviewed the intercepts, the troop movements, the diplomatic traffic. He chose his words carefully. Mincemeat has already resulted in some dispersal of the enemy's effort and forces. Then he sent a telegram to Winston Churchill, who was in Washington. 4 words. Mincemeat swallowed rod, line, and sinker. The German army was guarding Greece. The German navy was watching Sardinia. The 1st Panzer Division was on the road to a peninsula that would never be invaded. And somewhere on the island of Sicily, 300,000 German and Italian troops were waiting for orders that were not coming, because no one in Berlin believed Sicily was the target anymore. Operation Husky was now scheduled for July 9th, 1943. The beaches were almost undefended. July 9th, 1943. The Mediterranean at night. More than 3,200 Allied vessels are moving through the darkness toward the southern coast of Sicily. It is the largest amphibious armada ever assembled in the history of warfare up to that point. On board those ships, 160,000 soldiers, British, American, Canadian. They are hours from hitting the beach. The men do not know about Operation Mincemeat. They do not know about the body, the briefcase, the forged letters. They know only what soldiers always know on the eve of an assault, that what is ahead of them is dangerous, that men will die before morning. What they don't know is that the beach they are heading for has been stripped of its strongest defenders. The intelligence has done its work. The 1st Panzer Division is in Greece. 7 infantry divisions are in the Balkans. Sardinia has been reinforced. Sicily has been left to hold with what it had. The wind at night is fierce. A near gale batters the fleet. The airborne elements go in first. 137 British gliders carrying assault troops to seize a critical bridge ahead of the beach landings. The conditions are brutal. Navigational errors, anti-aircraft fire, gliders released too early over open water. 69 of the 137 gliders come down in the sea. Approximately 200 men drown before the invasion even begins. But the beach landings hold. In the early hours of July 10th, Allied troops storm ashore along a 100-mile front on Sicily's southern coastline. 8 divisions hit the beaches simultaneously. The resistance they encounter is scattered, disorganized. The Italian coastal divisions, poorly equipped and poorly motivated, fold quickly. Many surrender within hours. The Germans fight harder where they are present, but they are too few, too thinly spread. They are waiting for a second invasion that is never coming. Hitler still believes Sicily is a feint. Even as Allied troops pour inland, even as the front begins to collapse, the German High Command hesitates to strip forces from Greece and Sardinia. General Jodl had told the Rome commanders to forget Sicily. That confidence has calcified into paralysis. Reinforcements that could have been surging toward Palermo are standing on Greek coastlines, watching empty water. On July 11th, German armored counterattacks at Huelva push the American 1st Infantry Division back toward the beach. It is close. It is brutal. Naval gunfire from Allied destroyers breaks the attack and holds the perimeter, but there is no coordinated, island-wide German counteroffensive. It never comes. The Allies expected to lose 10,000 killed and wounded in the first week alone. The actual number across the entire 6-week campaign is approximately 6,000 British, Canadian, and American dead. Around 3 times that number wounded or missing. On the Axis side, roughly 9,000 Germans and Italians are killed. More than 100,000 are taken prisoner. The Allies had predicted this campaign could take months. It takes 38 days. In Berlin, the realization comes slowly, then all at once. Hitler's generals begin to understand that the landings in Sicily are not a feint. There is no second invasion of Greece, no assault force approaching Kalamata, no Allied armada heading for Sardinia. The documents that had been so carefully examined, so thoroughly verified, so confidently acted upon, they were false. Every word. But by the time that realization sets in, the campaign is already decided. On July 17th, with Allied forces driving north through the Sicilian interior, Hitler finally authorizes the transfer of the 1st SS Panzer Division from the Eastern Front to Italy. Too late to save Sicily, and across the island, something else is fracturing. The Italian people have had enough. Mussolini's fascist government has led Italy into a war it cannot win, on the side of a Germany that treats its ally as a subordinate. The invasion of Sicily is the final weight on a structure already cracking. On July 25, 1943, 15 days after the beaches were stormed, Benito Mussolini is deposed and arrested by order of King Victor Emmanuel III. The man who had ruled Italy for 21 years is removed from power, not by an enemy army, by his own king, on the same island where a dead Welsh tramp's briefcase had just redirected the entire German war machine. Sicily falls completely on August 17, 1943. The Mediterranean is open to Allied shipping for the first time since 1941. The Italian mainland is now exposed. The road to Rome has been unlocked. And on a quiet stretch of coastline at Huelva, Spain, a freshly carved marble gravestone stands over a man the world knows as Major William Martin, Royal Marines. The inscription reads, Dulce et decorum est pro patria more. It is sweet and fitting to die for one's country, but there is a question that the gravestone does not answer, one that will hang over this operation for 53 years, sealed inside classified files that only a handful of people have ever read. Who is he, really? And did anyone in the end notice the eyelash? The eyelash was gone. When the documents were returned to London on May 13th and examined under laboratory conditions, the evidence was clear. The letters had been carefully extracted using thin steel rods, photographed and refolded. The Spaniards had been meticulous, but not meticulous enough. The way the paper curled when it dried, the subtle difference in the fold lines, the missing eyelash. The British knew the Germans had read every word, and from the ultra-intercepts flooding out of Bletchley Park, they knew Germany had believed every word. The operation was complete. But for Montagu and Cholmondeley, there was still one question that would take 53 years to answer publicly. The man in the grave at Huelva, who was he, really? Ewan Montagu refused to name him for the rest of his life. In 1953, Montagu published his account of Operation Mincemeat, titled The Man Who Never Was. It became a bestseller. A 1956 film followed. Montagu described the man only as someone who had lived an unfortunate life, and said that the only worthwhile thing he ever did, he did after his death. That was all. The classified files remained sealed, the identity buried alongside the fiction on that Spanish hillside. For decades, the man in the grave was known only as Major William Martin, Royal Marines, a name invented in a London office, a rank chosen from a list, a face borrowed from a living MI5 officer who happened to look similar enough. The real man had no rank, no commission, no fiancée named Pam. He had died alone in an abandoned warehouse in King's Cross on January 24, 1943, having consumed rat poison. Whether deliberately or accidentally, no one ever confirmed. His name was Glyndwr Michael. He was 36 years old. In 1996, an amateur historian named Roger Morgan was working through recently declassified documents at the Public Record Office in London when he came across a single file reference. A name, buried in a classified operational record that had finally been released to the public after more than 5 decades. Glyndwr Michael. Morgan published his findings. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission confirmed the identification. And in January 1998, 55 years after a coroner's officer had quietly transferred a dead homeless man to WWII custody, a second line was added to the gravestone in Huelva. It now reads 2 names, Glyndwr Michael, served as Major William Martin, R.M., 1 man, 2 identities, 1 grave in Spain. Ewan Montagu was appointed an officer of the Order of the British Empire for his role in Operation Mincemeat. Charles Cholmondeley received the Member of the Order of the British Empire. Military historian Sir Michael Howard writing in the official British intelligence in the Second World War, called Operation Mincemeat, the best known and perhaps the most successful single deception operation of the entire war. The numbers bear that out. The 1st German Panzer Division, 18,000 men, 83 tanks, a hardened Eastern Front formation, spent the Sicily campaign on the wrong side of Europe. 7 infantry divisions sat in the Balkans waiting for an invasion that never came. Sardinia was reinforced with aircraft and naval assets that never fired at an Allied ship. Sicily fell in 38 days. Mussolini fell 15 days after the beaches were stormed. Italy signed an armistice on September 8, 1943. The Mediterranean was open. The road to Rome had been unlocked. Operation Mincemeat did not win the war, but it proved something that commanders and intelligence officers had long suspected and never been able to demonstrate at this scale. The most powerful weapon in warfare is not a tank division. It is not an artillery barrage. It is not even a fleet of 3,200 ships. It is what the enemy believes. The story of Operation Mincemeat is not a story about spies in trench coats. It is not a story about gadgets or glamour. It is a story about 2 men in a London office who looked at an impossible problem and decided the answer was a dead man, a briefcase, and an eyelash. It is a story about a homeless Welshman named Glyndwr Michael, who had nothing, no family, no home, no future, and who became, in death, one of the most consequential individuals in the Second World War. He never knew the role he would play. He never volunteered. He never had the chance. But the marble in Huelva carries both his names now. And the beaches of Sicily, where 160,000 men came ashore into thinner resistance than anyone had dared to hope for, owe something to the tide that carried him in on the morning of April 30th, 1943. This has been the file on Operation Mincemeat. What other WWII stories should we cover next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. Every story we tell is the version buried in after-action reports and declassified files. The real story, the one that was never supposed to get out. We'll see you in the next Frontline File.